Hi there all. So today I just wanted to do a quick side-by-side comparison of my two favorite Type 12 swords in my collection. The Type 12 arming sword has been my favorite sword type for years. And I received this Albion Knight going on about 6 years ago, and it has been my favorite sword in my collection for that entire time. However, I recently received this awesome Damian Saluski custom sword, and now I can't decide which one I like more. So the Albion, obviously if people know Albion, they are a production company. So their swords are largely machine made, although there are some touches that are done by hand, particularly the grinding, the blade grind. Whereas this Damian Saluski custom piece is made by a smith, so it is entirely forged and, as far as I'm aware, made by one man. So let's have a look at the blade profiles. The Knight has quite an interesting non-linear profile taper. By that I mean it tapers linearly until around where the fuller ends. There the edges bow, and it tapers more aggressively until it reaches the point where it tapers once again into the fairly acute point for this type of sword. Whereas on the custom sword, it tapers linearly right up until the point. The shape of the points are quite different. The Albion is more acute, whereas the Saluski piece is more spatulate. The Albion would theoretically be better for thrusting, and the Saluski better for providing tip cuts. That being said, the Saluski is a significantly stiffer blade than Albion, so keep that in mind when thinking about the different thrusting capacity. Distal taper. So the Knight has a much stronger and much more, I would say, nuanced distal taper. It starts at, if I remember correctly, 5.2 millimeters down at the guard and tapers down to about 2 millimeters at the tip. Now, like its non-linear profile taper, it also has non-linear distal taper. So it tapers more or less linearly up until where the fuller ends, and then becomes much, much flatter and thinner at the unfullered outer third. On the Saluski, I think it starts at about 4.7 millimeters at the guard and tapers down to 2.6, I think, near the tip. And as far as I can tell, it is a linear distal taper, so it doesn't really change its rate of tapering that much. If we look at the edges, so the Albion came with a significantly sharper edge, actually, out of the factory, and it's a single bevel, a full single bevel that's sharpened up. So you can probably see a change in light there. That is not actually a secondary bevel, that's the sharpening on the single bevel. On the Saluski, it has a teeny tiny micro bevel. It probably looks much the same in this light. There we go. But it's not actually the same. So that was blunt. It was made blunt, but with a very, very small edge that was then sharpened. So this is a micro bevel, whereas this is a sharpened single bevel. The Saluski piece is only, I'd say, butter knife sharp, so If you wanted to do serious test cutting with it, you'd need to sharpen it up, but it is apexed and it is quite good geometry, so if you sharpened it up, it would be a very serious cutter. It'll be hard to show on camera, but you might be able to see there is what seems to be a very faint plateau or hexagonal section between the fuller and the point. I find that rather aesthetically unpleasing. I rather like the look of the completely flat section on the unfulled section of the Albion. However, I believe that, I don't know if you'd call it a plateau. It's very, very hard to see, but I think it would make the blade on this Soluski sword significantly stiffer. As far as handling goes, for what I actually use swords for, which is pretty much just cutting up plastic bottles, the Knight is a much, much more lively and agile and I would say more pleasant sword generally to use. It's much more quick, it's much more nimble, it's about 200 grams lighter. And the Soluski, however, is, as I said, 200 grams heavier. That being said though, if this was back in the day and I actually had to take a sword to fight and potentially defend my life, I would actually trust in the heft and authority and power of this sword to get the job done. I would feel more confident carrying this more hefty and powerful sword, and significantly stiffer blade too, for both offense and defense to protect my life than I would with the more agile, nimble and fast Albion piece here. Let's have a look at the crossguards. They're the same. They're pretty much, the Soluski one is a bit wider, but they're both octagonal, straight. They flare at the tips. I can't recall the typology off the top of my head, but yeah, they're the same. The Albion, I would say, is a bit more comfortable to use because the facets here remain octagonal up until the grip, maybe inside the grip as well, but there's no hard corners there. On the Soluski piece here, the facets become square a good, I would say, 15 millimeters before the grip. So it's not that uncomfortable. It doesn't cause pain or anything, but I would say that the crossguard is a bit more pleasant on the Albion than it is on the Soluski piece here. As far as the grips go, once again, much the same deal. They both have cord imprint. They both have risers at the top and bottom. The shaping I like a bit more on the Soluski. It is significantly flatter, which is better for indexing edge alignment than the Knight, which swells, which is quite comfortable. However, that swelling is not as conducive to edge alignment as the more flat grip on the Soluski. The Soluski has stitching, which I think looks nice, but otherwise I'm ambivalent about, whereas the Knight has a nearly invisible seam. In fact, I can't actually tell which side it's on right now. One thing I will say is better done on the Albion is that the excess leather at the top of the grip is flush with the guard on the Knight, so it doesn't poke out. It's completely flush with the guard. Whereas on the Soluski there is a step, quite a noticeable step between the leather and the guard there. I would rather see it be flush with the guard, like on the knight. Now the last part, the pommels. The pommel, it entirely wins out on the Saluski. This is bronze, this is steel. Now, when the pommel is interacting with my hands, the only part that comes into contact with, I have fairly large hands, the only part that comes into contact with my hands is the flat section here, and it doesn't cause any discomfort whatsoever. Doesn't bite or anything. Whereas the rounded corners on the Albion here, usually I don't notice them, but sometimes they do interact with the palm of my hand in quite an unpleasant way. And after a fairly long session of cutting, sometimes I have bruises, a bruised section on my palm, because those edges, those rounded corners can bite a bit, especially when you have large hands like I do. As far as which one I like more, I love them both. They're both brilliant. I would say the Saluski wins out on aesthetics, but I'm obviously biased because it's to my design, so it's not really a fair comparison. If I designed it to the specs that I wanted to see and the aesthetics that I wanted, then obviously the Saluski is going to win out. For what I actually use swords for, backyard cutting, pretty much just plastic bottles. The Knight is more fun. It's just a much more light and lively and agile and quick sword, and just pleasant, with the caveat that the pommel sometimes beats up and bruises my hand a bit, whereas on the Saluski it does not. And but like I said earlier, the Saluski is a much heftier and stiffer and more powerful blade. And yeah, as I said earlier, if this was back in the day and I had to take a sword to defend my life, I would feel more confident using this. Okay, that's all I've got for you. I might post some cutting footage in the nearish future. Thanks for watching. Bye.